Yo, what's going on, guys? And of course, we got to do our play in preview and predictions between the Grizzlies and the Warriors. Before we start, I want to say a couple things. Comment and let me hear your opinion down below in the comment section. Who do you think will win this and why? The winner moves on to play the second seed. The loser plays the winner of the 9-10 game between the Mavericks and Kings. Now, the other thing is both of these teams had some changes. The Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler and the Grizzlies fired Taylor Jenkins and brought in Tuomas Iisalo. Now, with that being said, I'm going to be using the stats since the Jimmy Butler trade for the Warriors and using the stats for the Grizzlies since Tuomas has taken over. Obviously, their 9-game sample size versus a 32-game sample size, but I just feel like that has to be taken into account due to the fact that it's two different teams at this point. So let's go ahead and talk about the Warriors, as we'll have the Warriors up here and talk what have we been able to see this season when we look at this Warrior squad. I think one of the interesting parts about this team is they are not the team that you saw in the beginning of the year where Steve Kerr was trying to figure it out. So if we look at this squad since the trade deadline, this is a team that's been able, they put up some decent numbers since February 6th, since the trade deadline. They are second in the league in points per game, tied for it only behind the Thunder and Hawks, tied with the Bucks currently. This is also a team, yeah, they're shooting league average in field goal percentage, but they're also one of the better teams when it comes to being able to put up three-point volumes, which I think they've done a really good job of being efficient at the line, getting to the free throws, and taking advantage of their elite scoring and pace, which to me, I think was one of the biggest parts of this. They put up a medium level of shots in terms of their field goal attempts. I believe they're 15th in the league, but their three-point attempts, which is almost half of their shots with 42 attempts coming from their second most three-point attempts behind the Celtics, while also being a team that is now trailing only the Pistons in free throw attempts, with getting to the line with Jimmy Butler bringing that part of his game to this team. And I think that's just a metric that you can't just ignore. And the other thing is, when you look at this team, they've been third in assists since that trade deadline, which has just been kind of the reason why that ball movement, even though the last couple of games the ball has been sticking. And I asked Steve Kerr, I was at the Portland Trailblazers Warrior game, and I was able to ask Draymond questions, Steph Curry questions, and Steve Kerr, and they said the ball was sticking. They wanted to get the ball moving a bit better, and they had been turning the ball over a bit much, but I think their pace and play style that they had been playing with was something that was very indicative of their style. Now, this was the league best in generating steals as a team. They lead the league right now with almost 11 steals per game. Their rim protection is something that still needs a little bit of work, but they're getting offensive rebounds, which I've always said, them being a good offensive rebound, fifth best currently with 12 and a half of them, then almost 32 defensive rebounds, which is the 9th worst. They're middle of the pack in terms of their overall rebound. The stat is brought down a little bit because of that defensive rebounds, but they're able to have a high volume of three-point attack. They are the best in the league with free throw volume and efficiency, and they've been able to go ahead and put themselves in position to get good looks at the three-point line. And it's evident with them being top 3 in assists. Now, they are a below average defensive rebounding team. They're not good at rim protecting currently, and they do have stretches of turning the ball over. But this is a team that is firing on all cylinders. Now, let's go ahead and talk about these Memphis Grizzlies, which I think they've put themselves in a position to be able to play basketball the way that is effective for the Grizzlies roster. I think a lot of people didn't realize the other day they ran 86 pick and rolls with John Morant and Scottie Pippen. So this is a team currently, if you guys want to see over the last few games, it's a 9-game sample size. If we want to talk about the stats that we'll be using right here, I'll show some on the screen that gives us an idea of what this team is kind of working with under Tuomas, their new coach, who I do expect them to go forward a little bit. So right here, you'll see this is a team that is top 5 currently in the league under Tuomas. I think what we've seen is that defensively, they still remain a little bit below average, but they are making, above league average in terms of their volume and efficiency is up. They've had some excellent scoring recently, and yeah, their field goal percentage kind of league average, but they have a high volume perimeter attack, which is going to go good against the Warriors. I think they've had a consistent outside shooting, and they're drawing obviously a lot of fouls and getting themselves inside and converting those at a reasonable rate, while also being a team that is nearing 29 assists per game. Another team that is top 7 in ball movement, but they are turning the ball over 15 a game, and that's league average right now is like 12 and a half. So that's something that they need to work on. They're a team that clearly is having a high scoring offense under their new coach. They're top 5 in points per game. Their ball movement and assists have been something that's been a huge part of that. They're running pick and rolls, getting a lot of good looks. They've been above average in 3-point shooting, and they've been really good in rebounding. Now, the thing when we look at this squad, I think one of the things that hurts them is they're turning the ball too much. They're fouling a bit much. They're hurting the team's flow, giving up free points, and their defensive rating is actually bottom 5 league wide. They're 25th in points allowed. Their opponent field goal percentage is bottom 5, and their defensive rating is 25th. They are bottom 10 with personal fouls. They're league average in rim protection currently, and they've actually done a good job of getting steals, and they do a good job of competing on the boards, creating second chance opportunities, being top 10 in offensive rebounds and above average in defensive rebounds. So that's not something that I'm concerned of. And now once we start looking here, if we wanted just to break down their lineups and stuff, I think one of the interesting things for me before we start doing a comparison of each team's stats right here, let's just put on the screen the expected lineup. I know Jalen Wells is injured and he's not going to be back for the remainder of the season. Right here, we put together a little thing. This is kind of what I would expect. You have, obviously, the offensive engine is Ja Morant. You go with Desmond Bane. Those two, this is obviously stats since Tuomas has taken over. Vince Williams, the last couple games, has been their rotational wing who's been elevated into a starting role to take in the rookie 3-and-D who's out for the season in Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson at power forward, and Zach Edey at center. And then they've kind of gone with an 8-man rotation as of late. I think they're going to stick with that, in my opinion. If it seems that right here, what we have is Scottie Pippen, who's been a revelation. They're able to run 2 guard looks with Pippen, or they'll have Pippen come in for Ja Morant. Santi Aldama is another kind of like hybrid, versatile forward who can play the 3, the 4, and the 5 for them. And then Luke Kennard's kind of been a shooting specialist who's come off the bench. His numbers aren't great as of late, but his field goal percentage is something that I think is going to be able to come up. And then obviously their break the glass guys are Lamar Stevens, John Conchar, and Marvin Bagley III, who, Marvin Bagley is just a rim running, rebounding big. You got a hustle wing and scrappy dude in John Conchar, and Lamar Stevens just an athletic guy that I think is going to help them. And if you look at in comparison to the Warriors now, I think the Warriors starting lineup is going to be a bit interesting. If you look at it, the Warriors right here, Curry, B-Pod, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and Kevon Looney is what they've been kind of running as of late, which I think is definitely a good or a decent lineup. I think one that is kind of what they matches up well against a Grizzlies lineup. As we talked about earlier, the Grizzlies are going with Ja and Desmond Bane. So I think Curry versus Ja, obviously, then B-Pod versus Desmond Bane, Jimmy Butler versus Vince Williams. And that's going to be a big matchup. Will Vince be able, Vince is a great defender, but will he be able to lock up Jimmy Butler? Then Jaren Jackson Jr. going up against Draymond Green. That'll be interesting. And then Zach Edey versus Kevon Looney. And I assume, would we have a little bit of Trace Jackson Davis in there? Or do you guys think they'll go more? That's where I get interested in thinking like, who's going to be that guy on the bench rotation, as The Warriors are a little bit different. Mr. Steve Kerr likes to go Santi, Scottie Pippen, and Luke Kennard are going to be like the 3 dudes off the bench, while the Warriors, their 6th man is like Buddy Hield and Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga is more like this downhill free throw drawing spark plug, while Buddy Hield's the shooter who comes in the second unit, plays off the ball next to Curry, B-Pod. Moses Moody is their 3-and-D guy who's, I think, really aggressive defensively. Quinn Post is just this stretch 5 who's been fantastic for them. And if they need to switch it up, they'll have Gary Payton, Guy Santos, who are 2 guys who can come in and play if they need. Same thing with Trace Jackson-Davis. He's been depth player. And Pat Spencer and Kevin Knox were, obviously emergency players. But that's where I look at this, and it becomes really difficult to like choose, who's going to win right here, because I think now that if we look at like team by team stats, I think there's a bunch of things that we can point out. Now I'll go ahead and start pulling up what I wanted to show you guys just by a comparison. What do we see on the the eye test? As I think there's a few stats that will give us a good look. And again, these are comparing the Warriors stats since the trade deadline and the Grizzlies stats since Taylor Jenkins was fired, as I want to be able to give you guys a pretty fair comparison. Now, one of the things I think is going to be interesting is both teams are really good scoring and assisting teams. They both move the ball well. Obviously the Warriors aren't as bad as turning the ball over. They both need to take care of the ball. I think that's something that both team will look to exploit. Obviously the Warriors more than the Grizzlies, but I think if you look at their numbers offensively, the Warriors are going to be a team that is going to be putting up a bunch of 3-point shots. So is the Grizzlies. That's something that they share, scoring and 3-point scoring specifically, having a high free throw volume, getting to the offensive boards. Now, one thing, I think neither team is elite defensively. Like, they're not a standout. And the Grizzlies are a little bit sloppier when it comes to getting to the boards and I guess not getting to the boards, but not committing fouls. And they have a bottom 5 defensive rating. But as I've said repeatedly, both are aggressive 3-point shooting teams. Warriors a little bit more, but the Warriors have done a good job of getting steals and having a better control of their turnovers. But the Grizzlies are bigger, better at getting rebounds and controlling the boards. They are technically have the slight edge in field goal efficiency and shot volume. I think one of the interesting things when you look at this is that, to me, both teams are strong playmakers, but the Warriors are able to protect the ball far better than the Memphis Grizzlies, and I think that's going to be what they're going to try to exploit. While the Grizzlies, what they're going to try to do is dominate the glass and block shots, but what they're going to suffer and what the Warriors are good at is they foul a lot and they have poor team defense. The Warriors with Jimmy Butler draw a lot of fouls, and they excel in steals and transition offense and defense. Obviously, they lack rim protection, but they're going to try to exploit that repeatedly. And the Grizzlies take more shots overall, while the Warriors rely more heavily on threes, which obviously give you a higher point scoring, like total points, as if we were comparing these two. The Warriors are averaging 117, but the Grizzlies are averaging 121. So I think the whole thing is, if the Warriors are able to draw more fouls and stay disciplined, they can exploit the Grizzlies. And to me, I think that's the biggest thing right here. So to me, I think it's a toss-up. I do believe whoever wins this and the loser, they're both going to be in the playoffs. I think both the Grizzlies and the Warriors will be in the playoffs. I think the Grizzlies will beat the losers or the winners of the Kings-Mavs game. I think the Grizzlies are better. I mean, unless the Mavs, Anthony Davis continues to be God, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be either of those teams are going to lose to the Grizzlies. And I think the Grizzlies will be the 8th seed and the 7th seed will be the Warriors. That's just my thoughts on that one. I want to hear your guys' thoughts.